Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Soul Rising podcast. I'm your host, Amanda McCoy Flanagan. I am thrilled that you are joining me today. We always have wonderful guests. And today I have my friend in grief, Tara Accardo. She is part of the Get Griefy Small Business Collective that I've talked about before on this. And we both have been so lucky to meet such wonderful people that are just doing really heart-centered work. Mm-hmm. And Tara is just energetic, and you have like a contagious, infectious energy about you. And I really just wanted you on our show so that all of my listeners can get to know you and what you do, because you might be of great service to them. Who knows, right? Who knows who you can resonate with. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about Tara, and then we will launch into our conversation. Tara Accardo is a grief and transformational life coach and host of the Life with Grief podcast. After losing her parents to cancer within 6 months of each other and a traumatic birth experience, her journey of grieving led her to create Losses Become Gains, which I love because I'm all about that empowerment, a community for fellow grievers that serves tools, resources, inspiration, and guidance on how to navigate grief, loss, and moving forward in life with both in tow. Through her podcast, one-on-one coaching, and other modalities of support, Tara's passion, calling, and commitment to uplifting and empowering fellow grievers runs deep. So welcome to the show, Tara. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you do, why you do it? I really love the whole empowerment, uplifting piece, and maybe we could talk a bit about that in terms of grief.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, Amanda. I'm so excited. I could say the same thing about you and your energy and vibes, and I love it. I'm so glad to have gotten to know you over this time, and so excited to get into this. So yes, as you mentioned, my parent brand, I guess, if you will, is called Losses Become Gains, and it's funny because that name actually came to me. I'll make a very, very long story short. As you mentioned, I lost both of my parents. I lost them both to cancer within 6 months of each other. Wow. So my mom in December of 2019, my dad in July of 2020. And and then my 19-year-old dog, who I've had since I was 10, very much got me through those losses, died the following year. And I'm an only child. So for me, that was like my entire immediate family gone, within a year and a half. We always joke she was the sister I never had.
Yeah.
And I just, to say I hit rock bottom was an understatement. We all have our different rock bottoms. That was mine for me. And, so for me, I was just redefining, my entire life, what my relationship with being a daughter was now, and just, navigating life without those, I call my parents my North Stars, the North Stars that I had and would rely on. And they were my people. And so probably, I guess I would say maybe about was this maybe like a year and a half or so after my dad died, I found myself coping with my grief pretty well, weirdly. And I was doing pretty well, and I was like pretty happy, dare I say. And I was actually in a conversation with a psychic medium that I've gone to maybe once or twice a year since my mom died. And at the end of the reading, my parents had come through. It was an incredible reading. And towards the end of the conversation, I was kind of expressing to her that, like with this grief work, so to speak, I just feel really called to serve other grievers, to help other people, go through grief and life after loss, and just navigate a lot of the things that I have. Mm-hmm. And from within that conversation, I think it was even her that was just like, you're kind of like finding gains from your losses. I was like, oh, there's something to that. Okay, that's catchy, first of all. Mm-hmm. And I left that conversation feeling so lit up, and so I was already feeling called. So like something was kind of coming to the surface. Mm-hmm. And then those words were said, and I was like, oh, there's something here. So I spent that basically the whole year. That was like February-ish. I spent that whole year just writing, blogging. I'd always wanted to start a blog. And I was like, well, now's an opportunity, because I didn't want to just do a lifestyle blog. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but for me, I wanted there to be a little something there. Mm-hmm. And so I just started writing about different aspects of grief, navigating a wedding without your parents there, specifically without a mom, without a dad, anticipatory grief, like all these things that I had personally been through and had sort of like learned about in my own journey. And basically, I launched that, so to speak, in November of 2022. I'm certainly not gonna say it took off at all, but like I got great response. People were very just grateful that I was talking about it. They were like, this is really refreshing. Thank you. And I'm certainly not like the first person to talk about grief, but whatever little community I was building, I was like, this is really empowering. So within a month, maybe month and a half, I was looking at becoming a certified grief coach because I was like, wow, I think there's really something here. Like I feel very, very led into this work. And, let me get a certification under my belt so I can really help people beyond just my own personal experiences. I really want to be able to, help people in a very, heart-centered but knowledge-based sort of way.
Yes.
And so became a certified grief coach. And then, so this is now early 2023. And then the idea of a podcast came along. And funny enough, it was originally the Losses Become Gains podcast. I eventually changed the name to Life with Grief because on my podcast, I do talk about more than just grief, but that's the point, right? It's life with grief. There's so much to life with grief. And in solo episodes or even guest episodes, like we do dig into so much more than just the grief, but it is really, okay, how do we live life with it? That is like my bread and butter, right? Because it doesn't just go away. There are so many layers. You had mentioned in my little intro, I had a very traumatic birth experience as well. Won't go into that whole story, but that was last year. So it was 2024, early 2024. And I had been coping very well with my parents' deaths these last few years, but then that birth of my daughter brought up a whole new level of grief for me. And I'm still in the midst of that because now I'm watching my daughter grow up. My parents aren't here. I'm seeing my in-laws get that opportunity and my parents don't. And so it just goes to my point of like our grief softens. There are ways that we can absolutely have this amazing and fulfilling and joyful life after we go through these losses. But it's like, okay, what does that look like now? What does that feel like now? And so that's really where my passion for helping people comes from. It's like, okay, let's deal with that in your face grief, if you will. But like, depending on where someone is in the grieving spectrum, I guess, if you will, too. I get some people that are really, really early along. And then I get some people that are like, maybe kind of where I am. They're like, I'm actually doing okay, so to speak, but like, I want more. I know there's more out there for me. What is that? I'm curious. And within this time span of doing all of this as well, after launching the podcast, I also became a certified soul purpose and transformational life coach. So that's where that comes in. Cool. And that was a beautiful 6-month program. And basically, I myself was being called into soul purpose work because I felt like I had dug into my soul's purpose amongst all of this, between the podcast and like all these things that I felt so divinely led to get into. I was like, listen, I don't know if there's a rhyme or reason to why my parents died. Cause I've had someone ask me very poignantly, like almost like, do you feel like your parents died for a reason? Or like, do you feel like this was your soul's path was to like go through all this? I'm like, listen, I can't imagine myself knowingly signing up for this, but listen, I've got this one life right here, right now. If this is where I'm being led and this is what I'm going to create from all of the sadness and anguish, then fine. That's my journey. And I'm going to lean into that and I'm going to get excited about it. So, that's what this living with grief is for me. It's that duality and trying to carry them with me and figure out what that looks like, but also that uplifting part. So to come back to the gains and kind of finish this all up, like that's what that means to me. Because I think some people hear like finding gains from your losses and they're like kind of off put by that. They're like, there's an email I got, not from someone directly. It's someone who hosts a grief group. And she was like, by the way, I love the work that you do, but I have to tell you, I like referred someone to you or whatever. And she was kind of offended by the name Losses Become Gains because she was like, how could there be anything positive? How could I gain anything from all of this sadness and stuff? And I was like, well, I have some follow-up questions. But that's fair. I can kind of see, depending on maybe where someone is in their experience or what types of losses they've been through, like for sure, that makes sense. So for me, and this is beyond my name of Losses Become Gains too, it's really just like, it's all in the eye of the beholder. It's all whatever you want to make it for yourself. And you can define that however you want. And that's the most beautiful part of all of this is it's your sacred journey to navigate and figure out. And yeah, it's a difficult road and it doesn't always make sense. And you're led in different places sometimes, but just trusting that you are being led in the most divinely
Mhm.
sacred way possible. So that's really that's what gains means to me, at least. Or,
Mhm.
and it could be anything. It could be a new career.
Mhm.
I never saw myself being a grief coach, yet here I am.
Mhm.
Never saw myself having a podcast about grief. And just all of these things. Or it could be something just a little more spiritual, a little deeper, like tapping into a level of empathy and compassion and our soul's purpose that we never would have been in touch with before if we hadn't gone through what we had. So it's not always that we have to find a why behind something happening to us. Like there's not always going to be that why, but we can, challenge that a little bit. And we do have choices in what our life looks like after we go through something devastating.
Very, very well said. Very well put.
Thank
100% agree with all of that. And you will use the word called, right?
Yeah.
It does feel like a calling. And
Yeah.
if we feel called to do something soul-led, purposeful, what we're meant to do here,
Headed.
and other people must be as well,
Yeah.
right? So we're not the only ones. So
Yeah.
I do something similar to you,
Yes.
where it's like I want to help people turn their pain into power, pain into
I
purpose,
love
whatever
that.
that looks like, and it doesn't need to be big things. You don't need to start a pod.
Right.
You don't need to write a book. You don't need
Exactly.
to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
Whatever it feels like to you. And I love when you said if that's just you tapping into a level of empathy and compassion that maybe you didn't have before, that's it. But, I could see where somebody would be offended in acute grief, right? Like,
Yes.
like that's very insensitive.
Like on paper, I
Yeah.
totally get that. But that's where I'm trying to be like, no, you guys, it's deeper than that. This is actually like kind of a big evolution of self and a big shift. And
Yes.
we can choose to ignore it and we can choose to stay stuck. And again, this is going to be hard for someone to hear if they're a little bit earlier on in the grieving
Yes.
journey. I want to say that. And because if I had heard this earlier on too, I
Sure.
also probably would have been offended.
Yes.
Would have been like,
it could sound, yeah, it could sound a little uncompassionate. Like,
yeah, you'll be fine. Like,
yeah, like we're
no.
not saying that. And
No.
I know in those beginning days, weeks, months, maybe
Yeah.
a year or what, it feels like my world has ended. Why is the world still going on around me?
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
That's just an affront to begin with. And then to suggest that I'm supposed to like make lemonade out of lemons when
Please.
like
Yeah.
my spouse or my parents or my child, I've had this major loss. Like,
Yep.
no. So I think this work is probably for people a little bit further out. But like you actually talked about, you mentioned the word anticipatory as well.
Yeah.
And I have a coaching client who was in anticipatory grief for 5 years. Her mother was slowly leaving us from Alzheimer's. So she kind of went through that grieving process. And then when she actually passed, she felt like she's feeling kind of like, why aren't I like broken down on the floor? Why aren't I having all those like acute grief feelings? You know what I mean? And so whatever your grief journey is or looks like may set you up for this type of work or moving forward into your purpose or whatever it is a little sooner. So there's no time frame on this, but I think we both do want to be sensitive to listeners or people watching that, like you said, it's all you're on your own timeline. It's all your own journey whenever you are called to do something, because it will, like something like that, like especially traumatic losses and like they just shake you up in a way that you can never be the same.
Absolutely not. Yep.
And then then what? Then what? I have to do something with my life. And most likely it's going to look very different than what I did before. That's just kind of how it happens.
Right. And we can mourn that. I completely get it. We just want to go back. We want things the way that they were and whatever. But, with time, I think where I eventually started tapping into my soul's purpose and all of this work was like, I'm not going to be that girl again. As scary and as sad and as much as we might like long for that, we're humans. We're growing and evolving and changing anyway, right? And with life, there is loss and vice versa. And so it's not that we have to like embrace the loss per se, but like we can't change it. I think that's the hardest thing. And I work with clients on this all the time is like, let's just call a spade a spade. Telling ourselves these truths and being this brutally honest with ourselves or hearing someone say it is like one of the worst parts of this whole grief experience. Like it is something that we need to hear. We can't change it. Any guilt, any regret, any of the coulda, woulda, shouldas, the what ifs, or whatever, so valid to have. And I do encourage people like, yeah, we have to kind of like let those things come. We have to process it, right? It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
We're human. That's valid. But eventually there is this place that we kind of want to navigate to that is like, okay, I could feel this all day, every day, and this might never go away. But once you start feeling it is preventing you from like living your best life and it is keeping you stuck, that's, I think, an indication that it's like, okay, it's time to have a different relationship with this. And that's where sometimes, we have to have these tough conversations like, okay, yeah, you can regret not picking up that call from your mom that one day, but like, what are you going to do? You can't.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
dead. She's dead. Let's call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
She's gone.
Yeah.
So we have to release that. And I think that's what I was able to kind of get to for myself. Once I started releasing those things, oh my God, not that I was okay all day, every day, but like the peace that started washing over me. And then I was like, oh my God, I can feel like I can breathe again a little bit, slowly but surely. It's those micro moments, right? That we, if we just allow those in, just here and there, this is, oh my God, they're life-changing.
Yeah, I don't think we're doing anybody a service by tiptoeing around and kind of co-signing people's forever loss. So funny, so I'm Italian, and we have the phrase, the black drape. And when somebody dies, the old school Italian ladies, they just put on black and they wore black for the rest of their lives. My husband was laughing about Pope Francis. He's like, there's going to be a lot of ladies in black, a lot of Italians in black.
Yeah.
But we don't have to stay in that, and I think sometimes it comes down to this, like you're saying, the guilt of like, does it mean that I don't care enough?
Right.
If I move forward, if I actually become better than I was before. And I can speak for myself, and I bet I can speak for you too. I like myself better now than before all of my loss. I don't want that old Amanda back. I changed and shifted and transformed in such a divinely inspired way is the only way that I can really explain it. It really wasn't of my own doing. It's kind of just like a forcing. I feel like I have like little angels or something kind of pushing me from behind.
Girl,
like,
same.
Do this. Do this. Right? Inspired action, all that kind of stuff. We just feel this inspiration that I never felt more alive, I think, before, like than I do now. And I love that soul purposed coaching. I mean, that's awesome. So I love that you do life coaching and grief coaching. And I'm sure there's a ton of crossover.
Oh, it's all crossover, really. I also work in marketing. So like my marketing brain is like, okay, yeah, I have my grief coaching, I have my life coaching, but like they are so intertwined. And I think it's just people need to be kind of met where they're at. So like if someone is really struggling more with the grief, okay, let's lean into the grief. If they're like, okay, I got my grief under control, but like I'm really interested in like, oh my God, what is my soul's purpose? I don't know, tell me. And I'm just like, well, I can't tell you that, but I'll lead you to figure it out. I'll be your guide.
Yeah.
And it's the most incredible work ever. It's so empowering. And watching those little aha moments happen. So if that's where you feel like you are, okay, let's lean into that. But I'll tell you, it's funny. I have some of these life coaching clients, and I have people that I work with there. It's amazing how much of the grief still comes up that they think they have kind of dealt with. And we're in sessions, and 3/4 of it, we're talking about their deceased husband. And I'm like, I think you need to talk through that a little bit today. So I really lean like wherever, and I'm sure you can empathize with this as well as a coach, like whatever sort of comes up in a session, I feel like comes up for a reason. So we can have like a plan going into it or whatever.
It never really works out that way.
Oh my God, no. It's almost like these recordings sometimes. Like on the podcast too, like I might have like kind of a plan of like what I want to talk about, but like it's those unscripted moments or something someone might say. And I'm like, oh no, hold up. We gotta talk about that. I like to think that happened for a reason. So that's kind of how I'm sure you're very similar. Like I kind of approach the work that way because I'm like, it's that divine leading, I'm just like,
And do you find that like a lot of the work that you do, whether with your life coaching clients, not your grief coaching, goes back to loss in some capacity, maybe the inability to accept it or the resistance or not surrendering, because there are so many types of loss, right? Like, and I changed my title to loss and empowerment coach because grief, people think death, right?
Yeah.
So like, but I feel like the majority of people's troubles, and I know my troubles were not being able to accept certain losses that might look like wishes of way a relationship might turn out, or feeling like that I had this plan and then all of a sudden life happened, or something happened and then took me off course. So I mean, so many different ways that loss shows up. So
Oh, yeah.
I feel like it kind of all goes back to that anyway. The grief.
It does. There's a lot of clients I'll have specifically for the soul purpose coaching or life coaching, kind of whichever way we lean. And a lot of it will come. I've noticed like identity is huge
Yes.
when it comes to like they're kind of low key going through an identity crisis. So, for example, I've had a client who lost her husband, and that husband had, companies and wealth, and there was a lot of that. And so she was like CEO's wife, kind of a relationship, and always, maybe not always, but for many, many years had money and had that stability and whatever, and like really intertwined her identity with that. And so there's a lot, and so that's where a lot of the work that we kind of get into together, it's like, okay, let's unpack that. And then that's where some of the grief about just her husband no longer being here comes up. And then other clients I've had too, is like their identity is really wrapped up in being like they've always been the very reliable type A, really good at planning, mom type, but she's like, I'm more than that though. And I have this creative side. I'm not just this analytical person. And like, what do I do with that now? How can I combine both of them? Like just just come feeling very lost, honestly. And so 1,000% are identity and like a loss of identity, I think in a lot of ways that can stem from losing actual people can 100% come up.
Yeah. I mean, when I moved from New York to Colorado, I suffered a major identity crisis. And I didn't realize that it was loss until I started doing loss grief work after my brother died.
Right.
Therapy. And then we're just talking about my life events and things that came up. And I realized that in the times when I struggled most, centered around loss in some capacity.
Yeah.
And just the resistance to wanting to feel the pain, really.
Yeah.
Who wants to feel pain?
Fair. It hurts. It's not comfortable. Like, we just want to be happy. And
yeah,
I get it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I really like when you said our grief softens. Does that happen with time, or do you think that, how do you think people can reach that point? Is there actually something that people can do to have that grief not feel so painful?
Just anguish filled. I will never sit here and say time heals all wounds, right? Like it doesn't. It's, oh gosh, I was just talking to someone about this. I did not make this up. It comes from somewhere. They basically were like, it's what you do with that time that matters. And I was like, yes, could not have said that better.
Yeah.
So absolutely. Of course. Yes. Time is certainly going to help. I should mention, kind of as a sidebar, that can also bring up new elements of our grieving experience too. So for example, I'm now about 5 years out from losing my parents. And I've noticed around like the 3-4 year mark, especially, it was scary because I felt like I was getting a little far away from them. I would forget, not their voices, but like things they might say. So if I'm like, kind of asking the universe or whatever for guidance and my parents for guidance and things, I kind of would maybe get like an intuitive hit or something would come to me and I'm like, oh, but is that just me and my ego, or is that them? Like, is that something they didn't actually say? I don't really know now. Or even if people were to ask me, like, oh, what would your parents do in this situation? What do you think, your mom and dad would think? And I'm like, I think I know, but like, oh my God, maybe not. Like, and it's kind of scary. And then for me too, as an only child, I feel a lot of pressure to keep their memory alive and make sure my daughter knows who they are. She'll never meet them. So that's absolutely devastating. Never saw that on my bingo card.
Yeah.
That they, didn't see me get married and all of those things too. Yes, time helps, but then this is why I get so frustrated that some people, will try and like impose a timeline on loss and grief, because it's like, are we not taking into account these, not only just major life milestones, but like the quiet, subtle, sacred moments where we just miss them? That's not going to just go away. Even if you're alive longer than they were in your life, like it just doesn't matter. So, it's one of those things. And this is why I'm so like you, very keen on normalizing grief and how long it lasts. And of course, I always caution that, if you are really deep in your grief and it's truly affecting like your mental health, your day-to-day life, like there could be some prolonged grief.
Yes.
I think technically disorder happening there. So like, of course, I always recommend, seeking the correct, most aligned help for that. But it's like I was kind of mentioning earlier, those micro moments. And I actually have a little mini program literally called Micro Moments for Transformation. That's good for people who are in their grief, but also for people that are kind of at that next step that are like, okay, I'm kind of ready for the next thing. Because those micro moments really, I mean, I can't stress enough how life-changing those have actually been for me. And I truly attribute those little actions I took every single day to helping me get to the place that I am. And also, frankly, as a coach and as someone who is in this grief space, just talking about it so freaking much, like very cathartic. It has been helpful. But you don't also, like you're kind of laughing and alluding to earlier, it's like you don't have to go host a podcast or, whatever. You don't have to do anything big to talk it out. You can, as long as you have some friends or family or confidants or a grief group, if you don't really have anyone around you that really gets it, like just being able to hold that space for yourself, because that was one of the big realizations I had. And it was more actually in my marriage, and my husband's amazing. Like I'm very, very blessed, but he has two happy, healthy parents. And I'm around him the most, of course, right? We live together. So like, I can't expect him to hold the space for me that I maybe want. It's not like he's an incapable person, but he's incapable in this way. And I don't mean that in a bad way. He hasn't been through it. How would he know? He can do his best, but truthfully, it's having conversations like this with people like you who can just understand. Even if we've been through different losses, right? I haven't lost a brother, but like inherently we've experienced the loss of a loved one via a death, and we know that grief. And of course, each of our own journeys with it are what they are. They're sacred, and no two are the same. But there's definitely some principles of grief, right? That can feel similar. And there's just this unspoken bond of everyone in this grief club that we didn't ask to freaking be in, of people that just kind of get it. So that community aspect is freaking critical.
It's huge.
But also for me, I definitely went very inward. Normally I'd caution against that. And I guess I still would, be very mindful of if you're isolating yourself a lot in your grief, like I said, I think it's a really delicate balance. I did that in a way that I would dare to say was healthy. Because for me, I was like, I inherently intuitively know that I need this me time. I need the peace and the quiet, and I don't want other people's expectations. I don't want other people's opinions. I need to figure this out for myself. And this might be kind of only child syndrome coming into, but like I'm kind of a little bit independent by nature. My parents were pretty independent too. And so there was just something about that where I was like, I just need this time to take that like sacred pause and just be and figure out what I want, where I want to live, what I want to do for my career, like what is next to me. There was something about my parents dying that just cracked something open in me, as it does many of us. But like it suddenly kind of the world became my oyster a little bit, because it's very strange, especially losing parents of all people. You're like kind of not tethered down in the same way. And my parents didn't tether me down. I was in my late 20s. I was like living my own life. I was an adult. But there really is like no one like above you, so to speak,
that's interesting.
Imparting their stuff. And so I was like, it was like weirdly empowering, but also so painfully isolating and terrifying too, because I was like, oh my God, I really like, I had people to go to, but I didn't really have people to go to, if you know what I mean? Like they were like I said, they were my people. So I've had a podcast episode about almost the importance of that alone time to do that self-reflection and go inward, and just having a good balance, making sure we're still getting ourselves out there and having that social interaction, getting that support, but doing that sort of internal work. So for me, it's kind of a lot of, buzzwordy things. I listen to podcasts on a variety of topics, not even grief, honestly. some business, some marketing, some whatever. I mean, whatever I was sort of feeling that day, spiritual led podcasts as well, which is very eye-opening. And I love that. Reading very, specific books, even fiction. Because for me, fiction, it was like a little bit of an escape, but also it honestly kind of helped me get excited about life again, because I was like, ooh, maybe I can live in Italy and France one day and stuff. Like I'm kind of like, oh, maybe that's available to me now. Oh, maybe that's available. What do I really want? And journaling, checking in with myself, going on my walks every day, which was very meditative for me as well. So just all of those little things on a daily basis. And listen, there were some days where I didn't do it. I didn't go outside. I didn't journal. All I could do was barely get my dog out for a walk. And I allowed those days too. It was, took a long time. Like this is all, again, over the span of years, this is a process. Looking back in hindsight now, and I still do all of these practices, I was just like, that is what got me here. And that's the most beautiful part of all of this. I was like, no one else was responsible for that other than me. And I was like, wow.
There's a difference between isolation and solitude.
Yeah.
It sounds like you chose solitude to meet yourself. And we have so many similarities and parallels on our grief journeys, because I did the same thing. And it was really during COVID. It was really all 2020.
Yeah, same. When we were already kind of like,
I appreciate it. I welcomed it because you find yourself when you're immersed in the world and people and stuff. But I think there's more clarity when you're not overwhelmed with other people's voices or opinions or expectations or needing to show up in a certain way. You can really
kind of had an excuse to be like, see you in a few weeks, maybe with masks on. Like,
exactly. And you really are able to hear and listen, I think, a little bit. Yes. It was just quiet. It felt just like a very quiet year. Nobody was out. You'd go out to the supermarket, whatever. It was very quiet. So we spent a lot of time with ourselves. And I think that's why so many people had a hard time with it, because it's not very comfortable.
Right.
But it's really where we meet ourselves. That's why meditation and, mindfulness, stillness, they say, right? Like that's where we get those intuitive hits, those downloads, those messages you were talking about. Like that's where the opportunity for those things are. That's where they emerge.
Yes.
Is when we're just ourselves by ourselves. I really met my true self. I was like, I'm not like, I was so paying attention to, I'm an overthinker. And I was paying attention to like the most minute details. Like what color nail polish am I wearing? Like, am I wearing it because that's what's trendy or that's what's in? I was never really a trendy person, but like, I'm aware, obviously, what's going on in the world. And I was acutely aware of how much I still cared what other people thought of me after years of working on myself. It was just like, and that again is that I always say grief is a gift. The gift that we're given is this solitude. We might not want to be around people. We might be seeking that. It's like a meeting our souls, and I feel like there's not many other experiences other than grief that can do that.
Yeah, it really puts things into perspective for you 100%, which I think anyone who's been through grief, even not just a death, like it could be a major job loss, a divorce. Like I have a family member who, two family members, they divorced and it's getting a little bit better, but it's like their entire, speaking of identity has completely turned upside down. And I get, it's like there's resentment. They're like, what do I do with that? What now? And, and it is that figuring out process that like, we didn't sign up for it, but like, okay, so we're either, I hate this kind of hate this term, but we're a victim of our circumstances, or we can have that gentle invitation to ourselves to just get curious, just wonder, just start to crack the door open. And I think that's like the key to what I did. I knew I didn't want to stay stuck. I knew my parents wouldn't have wanted that for me either. My parents are like lovers of life. And, so I was like, well, I'm going to wallow, but it's not going to be a forever thing for me. It's just not. I refuse. I refuse. Our time is way too short here.
Yes.
If we've lost a loved one, I think many of us can attest to that. And I was like, I'm not falling into this trap, man. Like,
yes, I love it. I love your spirit. It's so amazing and uplifting and empowering. Those are perfect words to describe what you do. And I feel like the gift is that once we go through that process of really meeting, knowing, loving ourselves, right? We learn to like ourselves. We learn we're not all that bad, our self-worth grows, like all this stuff like happens.
Yes.
And then it's not like we're necessarily preparing for a loss down the road. Like that's not why we're doing it. And nobody can really ever be prepared for any kind of loss, right?
Of course.
Even though we've been through
Oh yeah.
major darkness. But there is I do believe that my next major loss, I probably will handle it differently. I might not be in bed for 3 months. I might I just have grown to a place and I've evolved to a place because of my grief to where I think I can handle life a little bit better as it keeps coming at me. I mean, just in everyday experiences.
Just everyday stressors and things too. Yeah. Like grief, it does equip us, like, and that's the thing with this life with grief sort of idea that I have. It's like, yeah, there's grief, but like how many, think about other ways that we maybe have little mini griefs throughout the days or weeks or something. Someone who didn't maybe meet our expectations on something, someone who disappointed us, someone who hurt our feelings, or something that we said or did that we're not proud of. And, we're dealing with all of these complicated, very human emotions. Like, hi, welcome to life. Welcome to being a human.
Yeah.
So there's something so kind of beautiful about grief, but so much beyond grief that it teaches us how to just freaking cope with life.
Live. Yeah.
Breathing and emotional regulation and, all of these things. And I'm like, oh my God, I was not in touch with any of this.
I know. It's wild. It's wild. It's like eyes wide open, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Spiritual experience, really.
It is. It is. And that's the really kind of special part too. And my mom was a very spiritual person, more than I'm even realized. And it's like I knew it, but I didn't care. I was very surface level at the time. And not that listen, I get caught up in surface level stuff all the time. But I'm learning more about my mom now. And that was like, that was a regret of mine for a while. I'm just like, oh, I wish I had asked her questions. I wish I had gotten curious. I wish I could have gone down a little bit of that path with her. But I was like, you know what? Maybe I wasn't supposed to understand it until now. Maybe, and also I was younger. Like we have to give ourselves some freaking grace for the things we didn't know or didn't have the life experience of before.
Yes.
You don't know what you don't know. It's like one of my favorite expressions. You don't know what you don't know. And so it's like, oh my God, give yourself a break. It's okay.
Yeah. And they're not like, some people say, oh, are they upset? Are they mad? And their spirit is never mad.
What other is going on, man? They are, I'm convinced. I mean, everyone has their ideas of like kind of where our loved ones are and whatever. I am a firm believer that there is room for nothing else wherever you choose to believe they are, other than it is joy and elation and light and love. And that is like, it's all consuming. They're so good. They're so good. And it's really hard for us as humans living a very ego surface experience to kind of probably even be able to wrap our heads around that. And that's okay. But so I never like to talk on behalf of anyone else's loved ones, but I will speak on behalf of mine. I was like, I know they're good. Do I wish they were here? Hell yeah. Sure. Like, I'm upset. I didn't want them going anywhere, but you know what? Listen, they're,
I've read lots of studies on near-death experience, lots of books.
Oh my God, same.
And they say like almost everybody says they didn't want to come back.
Yes. Yes.
So...
Or they like almost kind of fought it, and then whoever it was,
like, you gotta go.
Like, no, actually, sorry, you're on that way. Turn your butt around. Like, yeah, seriously,
you're not welcome here. Like,
yes,
I don't know,
not yet. Sorry,
frozen one that froze is like the snow monster when they go up to Elsa's castle. They're like, you're not welcome. Like,
exactly.
Anyway, so
that's so funny.
All right, well, I gotta run because, I said before, I gotta cut this a little short. Gotta go pick up.
All good.
So why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you, because you guys need to go follow Tara.
Oh, thank you. You're so kind. Yeah, really, all of the work that I do, any ways to work with me and everything, it can be found on my website. So that's lossesbecomegains.com. So as of right now, at least, I have a couple little mini courses. I have one for those earlier grievers kind of more in the acute grief, a 14-day relief in your grief experience. It's really beautiful. That micro moments for transformation one that I mentioned, which is for those who are maybe a little bit further along. All the information on my one-on-one coaching is in there. And then, as you mentioned, the Life with Grief podcast, and that's just available wherever you get your podcasts. And you can follow along at Losses Become Gains or at Life with Grief podcast.
Awesome. I love that. Relief in your grief.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Very,
was like, I
you
love,
must be into marketing. You must
love
be,
it.
you must
You
be.
know, there's like, I was like, how can I make this as clear as humanly possible of what they're going to
Right.
get here? You're
Yes.
going to get some relief in your grief, period.
Fantastic. I love it. And there's a
Yeah.
freebies. There's a link I will include for our
Yes.
listeners, some free tools from your
That's good freebies.
website.
Yep.
That's awesome. All right, guys. So
Yeah.
thank you for being with us. And Tara, thank you so much for having this great conversation. I think
Great.
you're amazing. And thank you for being so real,
Oh, of
and
course.
showing up like so authentically. You have a great way of like not sugarcoating things, but still saying them in a way that is kind and loving.
Thank you. I just got chills. Thank you
It's
so
kind of
much.
like a gift, to be able to say the hard stuff
Yeah.
in a beautiful
Still with a little hug.
way. What?
I'm just like, still with like a little hug. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to tell you some really tough stuff right now, but here's
Well,
a
I
hug while I'm
do.
saying it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you got it, girl. You're doing it. So thank you
Yay.
so much. And I will see you around.
Yes, you will, ma'am. Have a
Okay.
good one.
Okay, you too. Bye.